Hello, and welcome back to Crit and Crit. I'm Sint,
I'm Axion.
and we are continuing through our discussion of Hans Christian Andersen's The Snow Queen while we play through Mario Adventure. Ironically, since we've gotten out of the ice world, it seems a little less apropos.
I have made a mistake.
As do many of the characters over the course of The Snow Queen. Speaking of, today we're talking about the cast, which is actually fairly extensive for a fairy tale.
So let's just start at the beginning with our main characters.
You want to start with Kai or Gerda?
Let's start with Kai, just because he's the first one really introduced.
Alright, so Kai starts off as just a fairly normal kid. He's really only notable after he ends up getting afflicted with the mirror shards that render him incapable of seeing the good in anything. Well, that's gonna hurt.
Yep.
So again, once he is afflicted by the mirror shards, he is unable to see the good in anything, starts just generally lashing out at everyone around him, becomes cruelly logical, is I guess the best way to put it. The only things that interest him are like things of pure logic.
Yep.
And symmetry. There's no room for like any other form of imperfect beauty in the world. Well, this is not your run, is it?
It is not. It has been a long time since I played this game.
So yeah, there's probably a lot to be said about what you can analyze regarding Kai. Like, does logic necessarily guarantee that you become cruel? I wouldn't necessarily say so. We could save that for another episode. How much excuse can be given for someone's behavior, since he's not really in his right mind for the entirety of the story. Like, he's being afflicted by the demon's mirror and is under the effects of the Snow Queen's amnesia spell. So once he gets there, he doesn't remember anyone.
Yep. One could successfully argue, or reasonably argue rather, that he is not in full control of his own faculties and thus not responsible for his behavior.
That said, that doesn't really take away from the harm that his behavior causes. Like,
Yes.
This is where things get really tricky when you bring up things like extenuating circumstances. Like, yeah, you can argue all you want that somebody's having a really rough time of it, but cool, now you're making everybody else have a really rough time of it too. So, I'm sorry that you're going through a time, but that doesn't mean you have to make everybody else go through one too.
Yep. Well, so much for that.
I think you're going through the pipe. Oh, nope. Okay.
Ah, crud. There we go.
I honestly thought you were supposed to go through the pipe.
I don't actually know where the pipe goes, but it made me make a bridge, so I'm using the bridge. Oh. That was nearly a nasty trap.
toot, 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 toot. Anyway. But anyway, that's basically Kai's thing, is like he takes the damsel in distress role for this story.
Yeah, which is a bit unusual. There's not very many stories that have a male damsel in distress.
It's kind of a nice change of pace.
Yep.
Which brings us to our hero, Gerda.
Gerda is an example of the hero who wins primarily through being the goodest person in the room. Gerda does not have any supernatural powers. She's not a gifted fighter. She's not... Well, technically she doesn't have any supernatural powers. She's not a warrior. She's not special, quote-unquote, in any way.
And honestly, unusually for this, she's also not especially clever. Which is usually what people would use, is kind of the message that gets sent with like, yes, you can't win through overpowering your opponents, but you can outsmart them. She doesn't. Like, Gerda is just a good, sweet, honest, and innocent child. And that's all she needs, is her honesty, and her pure heart.
Yep. Her power is solely in her purity and her earnesty. And her apparent supernatural powers all come as a result of her being good and pure and kind. And other than her ability to talk to animals, it all just seems to be she's such a nice and good person that people feel inclined to be helpful to her. I'm gonna try something right quick. There we go. That's what I needed to do.
Yay!
But yeah, since Gerda is such a good person, people are just naturally inclined to be helpful to her. And she completes her mission solely through basically convincing everyone to assist her just because she's so stinking nice.
Would that the world actually worked that way? Yeah, there's not a whole lot to say. She's not an exceptionally deep or complex character. She's just a good kid with a good heart. But then again, fairy tales rarely have extremely complex characters.
Yep, and in this case, it doesn't need her to be. Because the point of her story is that she is just a good person. And that gives her everything she would ever need to solve her problems. To the point where, I think it's the Finland woman, straight up says, there is nothing I can give her that she does not already have through her kind and gentle soul. And that if that is not enough to solve her problems, they cannot be solved. She will not be able to rescue Kai if she is not capable of doing so solely with the power of her pure and gentle heart. which is something of a... Some people would call it an old-fashioned kind of mindset, but I mean, given the era we're working in, it's a very traditional and common approach that one might, someone in Andersen's era would choose to take. Or I could do that too. But yeah, I think that wraps up Gerda.
Yep. Then we have the Snow Queen herself, who honestly features very, very little in the story named for her. Like, she's just the personification of winter. I don't think she does really anything evil except take Kai with her, but she didn't even kidnap him. He tied his sled onto hers. I don't know if she even noticed till they were off flying.
Not really. And then she's like,
"Yeah,
oh.
it seems a little unfair to call her like the villain when like she's like, oh hey, I have a hitchhiker. Okay, you look cold and sad. There, now you're not cold and sad anymore. Cool, stay here with me."
It's very much
Flat.
Yeah, it very much gives the impression that the Snow Queen, at least in the first part of the story, the Snow Queen is presented more as something akin to a force of nature as personified through a fairy creature. She's not malevolent.
I can say that.
She's not malevolent, but she clearly does not understand humans and human mores, and to some degree, it's clear she doesn't care. Those kind of things are just not something that matters to her. Because those are not her areas of concern. I figured there would be ground under that block.
There was not.
Later in the story, she does appear to be a little more malevolent in the whole, if you can spell out all these words, ending with having to spell out eternity, I will give you the whole world. And you could interpret that as a riff on the powerful, malevolent creatures offering immense rewards and gifts for strange tasks or for promises of fealty. If you wanted to interpret her that way, but it's not explicitly clear as such in the text. So it would be an interpretation. And we'll get into that get into more detail on that later.
Yeah, it's just not even like in the usual fairy tale fashion where you have to defeat the antagonist. Like, Gretel had to shove the witch into an oven to get Hansel back. Gerda just shows up, and they're free to walk out the door. Snow Queen's not even there.
Yep, she took off. And, other than leaving some guards at the door, she made no real effort to keep Kai there. And I think that...
It seems kind of odd, like, the whole thing's named after her, considering what minimal impact she actually has. Like, I'm surprised it's not named after the broken mirror or something.
I don't know. Oops. That's like, clearly I need to keep the boot as long as possible. So we finish with the Snow Queen, and the story jumps back to Gerda. And
Gerda's grandmother's in the story, but she's barely there, so I'm not really sure we need to mention her too much. Like, she's pretty typical grandmother.
She's an establishing background feature more than a character, I think. She has... The only influence she has on the story is through... Lost my momentum there. Is through the influence and effect that her raising had on Gerda and Kai as a background element, more than as something she actively did through the story. So yeah, I think there's not much to say on her, which means that the next actual character we meet is the witch woman in the woods.
Yep, and she just decides that she wants to keep Gerda, which, this is a common thing. Strange people in the forest tend to want to keep kids. Hard to say why. I got the impression that she's kind of lonely.
Yep, the translation that I listened to in preparation for this explicitly said she wanted to adopt her. Well.
Yep. So
it was like, oh, convenient, random stray child with no adults nearby? You are my child now. Which, in that era, would not have been all that abnormal of behavior for someone. I
don't know about that.
If a random kid showed up, and you were kindly inclined towards them, and they had no visible parents or other adult escorts, chances are their family was dead, and they were just a wandering urchin orphan.
Fair, but you'd think there would be an asking questions stage to find out if they actually were.
I mean, sure. My point was more like, crud. I can see the logic of it given the time period in which this was written, that the old woman being lonely, being out in the forest, and seeing this kid show up with no parents or other family assumes, oh, stray kid, free kid. And being a lonely old witch in the woods, decides that the best thing to do is to brainwash this kid so that she doesn't remember where she came from, so she can't be sad about whatever family she lost. And oh, we notice she has a reaction to roses, so I'll hide my roses because I don't want to risk anything that might trigger her memory and mess up this relationship that we're starting to build. There we go. I did what I was trying to do in the first place. That didn't work. Really need a fire flower for these. There we go. There we go. Fire flower makes that so much easier. Because I just jump, shoot, jump, shoot. But the good news is that while the old witch woman is pretty happy to brainwash Gerda and lock her away in her house, and hide anything that might trigger her memory into coming back. When Gerda does eventually regain herself, we don't hear of the old witch woman again, which means that, at least to me, that she'd made no effort to pursue. Oh, this level's gonna suck. Yep, there it is.
So, yeah, after the old woman, we have the prince and princess.
So the prince and princess are actually a fairly interesting situation, because the story actually has very little involvement for them. And as a result, they're more... Usually these kind of fairy stories have a lot of focus and a lot of influence placed on the various royalty and nobility that are involved in whatever the plot is, especially since so many of them involve the character marrying into nobility, discovering that they're secretly a lost heir or whatever, or otherwise moving up in station in the world with regards to their relationship with these noble characters. And this story really doesn't. The prince and princess are merely one of many stopping points in Gerda's search for information on Kai's whereabouts and fate. And oh my word, those fish. As a result, once they play their part, they're never really mentioned again, except in the final end scene wrap-up where Gerda and Kai are returning home and meeting all the people that Gerda got help from along the way. And even then, more emphasis is put on the crows, with the majority of the info regarding the prince and princess being provided by the tame crow, as well as her telling the fate of the wild crow that Gerda first met. Which we kind of did skip over the crows, but we can kind of wrap them into this bit anyway, considering they're associated characters.
Yep.
Oh wait, there's a door here. Oh, it just takes me back. Okay, I clearly need to get the boot, because it's going to help me travel here. Stupid fish. I lost my train of thought because of the stupid fish.
Alright, so what I was going to say is, like, what I find interesting about the prince and princess is that, well, the princess set the criteria for her husband of someone who knows what to say when spoken to, which is kind of a gender flip of how a lot of people seem to see how relationships should work.
Yeah, usually it's the man who is like, I want a wife. I want a wife who is silent unless spoken to, and who knows how to keep her mouth shut and her hands busy.
Which, yeah, I wonder why those guys can't find a date. Yeah, the prince basically just says he didn't come to woo her, he came to hear her wisdom, and she's like, I like this guy. So, I'm not sure it says too much positive about the princess that she literally was just holding out for somebody to tell her she's smart and to listen to her. But on the other hand, given how seldom women get listened to in many situations, I can totally feel that vibe.
Which is funny because my translation completely says something different. My translation says that the princess was looking for someone who could match her in wisdom. And that most of her suitors were just pretty boys who showed up hoping that they would be considered attractive enough, and that she sent them away when they couldn't match her in logic. And that the reason that Gerda thought the prince might be Kai was specifically because he had wooed the princess through his logic.
Okay, I think you have a much better translation than I do. Because mine just says, there lives a princess so wonderfully clever, she has read all the newspapers in the world and forgotten them too, although she is so clever. Why should I not be married? And so she determined to marry if she could find a husband who knew what to say when he was spoken to, and not one who could only look grand, for that was so tiresome. So she does want someone who's more substance than just style, but doesn't say the match in logic or anything, which I think you got a better translation. But the gist of the story is the same. Yeah, yours makes her sound much more interesting and reasonable.
Yeah. And I can see the reason. I can see a reasoning story-wise for both versions, but yeah, I like mine better. Oh, I needed
to do that?
I needed to ditch the boot there anyway, but I needed to not die to the fish.
Yep.
But anyway, yeah, as my translation goes, the prince is a clever young man who was simple of form, is how he was described, but swift enough of mind to keep up with the princess. And I hate this level. Screw it. I'm doing without. Nope, I'm not. There we go. You know what? That's fine. That's not fine. All that said, the princess is clearly not that wise, because her country clearly has a bandit problem, and she either doesn't know about that, or doesn't care, and sends Gerda off in a solid gold carriage.
Yep, which brings us to the robbers. I don't think there's much to say about the old robber woman. She murders, she steals, typical fairy tale antagonist stuff.
Yep. And the robber's daughter is not too different from that, but she clearly does have some understanding of morality, in that she feels bad about Gerda feeling bad. And is willing to give up some of her pets, especially primarily her reindeer, to see that Gerda gets to continue her mission, because not doing so makes her sad, and she doesn't want to see Gerda being sad. Which, again, gets back to the whole Gerda is so kind and pure that everybody wants to help her. Nope. We're not doing this in the snow. Snow makes everything slippery. Nope, I'm not doing that. Though I guess it would have been appropriate to keep it on for Snow Queen. Who's next? After the robber girl.
I think we just have the Lapland woman and the Finnish woman.
Which don't really have much character to them. They're way stops along the path. And they do provide Gerda with some resources and some information, as well as a safe place to stop. But they have little character to them as is. They're just plot points, basically. And there's not really much to discuss of them as a result.
Yep, so that's probably a pretty decent place to call it.
And now I have to navigate a maze while dodging these stupid fish. But we will do that next time.
With a clean start.
See y'all then.